My grandfather started making running shoes in 1895. He made himself a pair of running shoes in 1895.
Mad.
Yeah, man.
You guys have been in the shoe game a hell of a long time.
A lot of people became part of the Reebok community, whether they were buying shoes or not. Buying shoes, yeah, they'd always buy the shoes from us.
But you built a culture around it.
Everybody's part of Reebok. And quite a lot of them then started to work for Reebok. As we grew, we needed people. We needed people who felt the same that we did. Who had that heart, who had that love for the brand. Those are the early lessons that you think, well, problems are sent to improve your business. But this was 1968, and I'm trying to get into America. I didn't get in there until 1979. We'd gone from 9 million to 30 million to 90 million to 300 million to 900 million.
Hold on, you've gone from 9 million to 900 million in 5 years.
Yeah.
Together we have clarity, direction, and success way beyond what we ever previously thought possible. Here's your host, Frankie Lee.
First things first, guys, before we get started with this podcast, do me a solid favor and subscribe to this on whatever platform you're listening to it right now. Whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, I'd appreciate if you just hit that subscribe button, and it lets me know that the content that I'm putting out for you guys is hitting your ears at the right time. Much love. This podcast is sponsored by contentremoval.com. So whether you're looking to remove any images, videos, search results, fake Instagram accounts, get in touch with us at contentremoval.com. Welcome back to the Frankie Lee podcast. Today, guys, I am very, 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 very hyped to bring you this podcast today because obviously this is one of the first ones that we've done in the UK. And we have none other than the founder of Reebok himself, from $0 to $2.5 billion valuation brand today, Mr. Joe Foster. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Frankie. It's a pleasure. It really is. It's nice to be here.
It's good. It's good to have you. It's good to have you in my little humble abode in Peterborough.
We like it. As we said when we came in, this is our size of abode. This is beautiful.
Yeah. Well, I suppose a lot of people don't realise nowadays you're a digital nomad.
We are indeed. Yes. It's. We sold up in France. We lived in France, but wrong place. Maybe wrong place. And after COVID, we decided we'd move. But then the book really came along and started to work. So the book has taken us all over. So we're never bored again. We just now use. You got a computer, you got a mobile phone or a smartphone. Where do you need to be? Yeah, exactly.
And we were talking about this in the garden, weren't we? Like, you don't need to be in one location anymore these days, and the world is so close, and with everything's going on, and now COVID's lifted and all that stuff, we can all get around the world and place ourselves wherever we need to be. And not only for better tax optimization of business, but also like for like you say, give yourself lots of opportunities to do. You're doing the speaking tour and everything like that, and
that's right.
And it's all going forward. But I really want to with you. I really want to take it way back.
Okay.
I really want to take it way back with you because I really want to go into like what it was like for you growing up as a child in the UK at the time, and kind of get a sense of what you're looking at and what you're. Because I know it was your dad and your uncle originally that started what was J.W. Foster.
Well, you've got to go back quite a bit further than that. It was my grandfather.
Your grandfather, yeah.
He was called Joe Foster.
Right.
And he started, well, his business really was set up in 1900, but he started making running shoes in 1895. He made himself a pair of running shoes in 1895.
Mad.
Yeah, mad.
You guys have been in the shoe game a hell of a long time.
Well, indeed, yes, indeed. No, I mean, my grandfather, he was a bit of a genius because he invented the spike running shoe. And I think he got his idea from his grandfather. His grandfather was a cobbler.
Yeah.
And as a cobbler, not only did he repair shoes, he also repaired cricket boots, specifically cricket boots, which had spikes in the bottom. And my grandfather, his father was a confectioner. My grandfather didn't want to be a confectioner. He wanted to be a cobbler. So we used to go and see his grandfather. And that's where he got his idea. And I'm sure he asked his grandfather, why have they got spikes at the bottom of these cricket boots? And we're pretty sure the answer was grip. It gives them grip. When they field them, when they're batting or bowling, they need something. They don't want to slip. And that gave him his idea because he was a member of his local athletics club. And not one of the best runners in the world, but he enjoyed it. And he thought, if I put some spikes in the bottom of my shoes, will those give me more grip when I'm running on a cinder track? And they did. and that was it. And after making his shoes, instead of being sort of halfway down the field, he came a very unlikely second, which drew a lot of attention, as you can imagine.
Yeah, because obviously he wasn't the most gifted runner, was he?
No, he wasn't. So all his teammates were sort of looking at him suspiciously, like, is this cheating, or are you going to make us a pair of these? So that was the start of his business. He made all his teammates running shoes.
Is it something that he then went on and got the patent to and all that kind of stuff, so protect it, or did he not file for those things in those days?
No, he didn't file for those things in those days. He was, his ambition was just to make some shoes, and that was it. Just to improve his running. In fact, he thought if I could improve my running, it'd be great. And of course, that became a business. And it's difficult to know, whether he actually was the first one to put spikes in a pair of shoes that people ran in. But he certainly developed and pioneered the idea, and he is credited with inventing it. If you go to the British Shoe Museum, they sort of yes, Joe Foster invented the spike running shoe, and he also invented the training shoe. So maybe we can accuse him of what we see today now, that what he started has now become absolutely worldwide, global fashion.
So in terms of, so your grandfather then is in essence created the trainer.
Yes.
That is unbelievable. That is unbelievable.
Right. It was way back. But of course, in those days, it was pure performance. And that was the difference. It's just performance. Now it's street, and now it's fashion.
Yeah.
But in those days, it was purely performance. So, and he had influences. By 1904, he had 3 world records in his shoes by Alf Schrubb. Alf Schrubb was a guy, he broke 3 world records in one event at Ibrox Park, Glasgow. And, and that drove it. Obviously, grandfather had given him a pair of shoes, I'm sure.
And what were these shoes actually called at the time?
Well, I don't know at the time there would be anything more than Foster's running pumps.
Right.
They used to call them pumps in those days. But eventually we know that the hand-sewn running shoe were called Foster's Deluxe. So they became Deluxe, but I'm sure they're just running shoes, running spikes.
And when people started to set world records in Foster's shoes and all that kind of stuff, is that when you started to attract more and more attention to the brand, and people wanted to start getting sponsored by you, and people wanted to wear your track and field shoes and start to compete in them in the Olympics and stuff like that?
Well, a bit like that, because we've got to go back now over 120 years, 130 years, and in those days we didn't have that sort of thinking. He obviously knew how to influence people, but the word influencer probably wasn't even in the dictionary in those days.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but he was an influencer. He by 1908 he had Olympic gold medals in London. So, and he would give leading athletes his shoes. We traced him back. When we started Reebok, we became big enough to be able to spend some time and get somebody looking back on it. And we used to go through all the magazines and papers, and Foster's used to advertise. Really sort of unbelievable advertising in those days. And I think I can remember one being, if you don't think that Foster's the best spike running shoes you've ever worn, we'll give you £100. And
that was unheard. That was unheard of in those days.
Absolutely unheard. Well, can you imagine £100 in 1900? I mean, it's probably worth about 10,000 now.
Yeah. Probably a lot more than that, actually. I'd say. Yeah,
enormous amount of money. It's and of course, I don't think he ever gave £100 to anybody. But but yeah, he knew all about marketing. He knew how to build his business, and I would say globally. Partially globally, but mainly, we'll say, in those days, the British Empire. So, Canada, Australia, all around Africa, everybody would buy Foster's shoes. And
so they went really international then, early on.
Oh, yeah. Very early. He was selling, and certainly even in America, he was selling his shoes into America. Because there was a magazine called Athletics Weekly.
Yeah,
and Athletics Weekly, certainly in the Commonwealth, just used to get sold all around the Commonwealth. People wanted to know what was going on, but it was specific to athletes. But then what happened is, we'll say the African countries in particular, they would use magazines like this to teach English. And so all the kids would be reading this, and Foster's would advertise in there. And the advertisement at the bottom would be, write to us for our brochure, our illustrated brochure. And he used to get letters from all over the place just for the brochure. But they were learning English. I don't think they wanted any running shoes, but they were learning English. And it's funny because, I worked at Foster's for about 12 months.
Yeah.
But one wall next to the desk was just covered in stamps, because they used to take the stamps off all these letters and stick them on the wall. I wish I'd taken a photograph of it, but there were hundreds and hundreds of these stamps.
Just from all these people that had written to you from all over the world.
That's right, yeah. And as I say, really it was used by the teachers to give it to the kids, and just right there. It's a way of learning English. But it was great. Absolutely fantastic.
It's great that there's such a rich history of everything that Foster's have done, and it's gone through generations. As Foster's as a business, when you were a child and you were looking at I think it was your dad and uncle that went on to run that business. Was it? I mean, from what I've read, your dad and uncle, they never saw eye to eye on everything.
Anything, not everything, nothing. So eye to eye on nothing at all.
So it's just like full on arguments right the way through.
Yeah, I mean it's difficult. I don't even know to this day why there was such a feud going on. I don't know what caused that. There were 5 years difference in age.
Yeah,
and of course that doesn't help, because they obviously didn't share many things at the same time. But I don't know. It's one of those things, because I went into the business. You started off what it was like when I was a youngster.
Yeah.
Well, I was born in 1935, only 4 years before World War II.
Oh, so you lived all through that as well.
So I lived the 6 years of World War II, and that was my childhood, really. From 4 years old to 10, we had a war. So education was a little bit sort of varied. Mother did quite a lot for us. And the school that we should have been going to had been sort of taken over as I think they called them air raid posts in those days. So people would probably be looked after if they got bombs or whatever. Because we lived about 10 miles away from Manchester. And Manchester was a prime target. So we could see all the red glow when air raids were on. Because
Manchester back in the day, and probably still is, was an industrial hub for like all the shoemakers. There's a lot of shoemakers up there and everything, wasn't it?
Well, I think there was a lot of engineering. So engineering went on, and the D'Havilland made planes, of course. So it was a prime target anyway. So we had all that to put up with. So by the time I was 10. Then the lights came on again, because we couldn't have any lights on. Everything was dark. And the lights came on. I went to college, got an education, and I joined the company when I was 17. 18 years old, though, both Jeff and myself went to do national service. So we had 2 years of national service. So we left the company and went to do national service. And it was that bit, doing national service. Mother's not there. Your dad's not there. Fathers weren't there in those days anyway. They were never seen.
Yeah.
Fathers just went to work and then went to the pub. That was it. Almost every day, or went out somewhere else. And so mother brought us up. But when you're doing national service, you're taken away from the family. So you're making your own bed. You have to handle things yourself, and she's not making you food. So you start to learn a little bit differently of how to look after yourself, how to take the opportunities. And so when we came back to the factory, we looked at it with different eyes. We're looking at it and saying, this is supposed to be a business. Why are you two falling out? You know.
So you kind of started to see more opportunities within what you were going through because of the fact that you took yourself away from your mum and being cared for, and now you had to stand on your own 2 feet. So you come back, you see JW Foster with in a whole new light to what you'd seen it before you'd left.
Well, absolutely. Before you leave, it's just part of your life. When you come back, it's your living. Because this is where you're going to actually make the rest of your life, or you're supposed to. And so we came back with fresh eyes, and we sort of looked at father and uncle, and they're not speaking. In fact, Jeff and myself had to pull them apart on more than one occasion when they were fighting.
What were some of the things that they'd fight over?
That is hard to say, because the office, they'd be in the office and you just hear this raucous going on. So we'd have to go down there, and it must have been something to do with the business. Must have been the fact that my uncle, he looked after the hand-sewn side, that's turn shoe. And you can only make so many of those. So, hand-sewn, it's a difficult process.
It's an art.
And it takes time. And my father looked at the other side and started machine making the shoes, sewing them together. But and they kept their own books. Uncle Bill had his books for what he did, and my father had his books just for what he did. So, what is it?
They were working on different hymn sheets, so to speak, from those days. Like they were literally like, his finances were kept over here for everything that he was doing. His finances were kept over here, and they weren't really working together as a business. Essentially, what was happening.
Oh, absolutely. There were two separate businesses within the same building.
So when you and Jeff came back, what was the clearest opportunity that you both saw that you don't think your father and your uncle could see?
Well, Jeff went to Germany, and Jeff, when in Germany, he saw Adidas and Puma. He saw what they were doing, and when he came back, and I came back, and we're looking at what Foster's are doing, we said, look, you should be making a more modern shoe. You're making the same shoes you were making 10, 20, 30 years ago. You've got to change.
And what were the shoes that Adidas and those brands were making at that time?
Well, at that time, I think mostly Foster shoes were either black or brown.
Yeah.
And Adidas and Puma, they were making them in white and blue and red, so the colours were coming in.
Right.
And different styles. Foster shoes were more or less one style, with just a bit of difference here and there, or difference maybe at the quality of leathers and things like that. Whereas the pattern making of Adidas and Puma was different, and so they looked different. Excuse me. And so we were saying, come on, we've got to get up to date. And also, Adidas in particular started to use a nylon sole with screw-in studs, screw-in spikes. And of course, Foster's were still doing leather, still with the spikes which are sort of knocked through the sole, as it were, and a plate to hold it. The methods were not moving forward with the methods. And it's just incredible that if you're not talking to each other, if you own a company like Foster's and you're not speaking, nothing's going to happen.
So how did you go about healing that wound so that you could take the business forward?
We didn't. We left the company.
Right, okay.
That's what happened. We left JW Foster. Jeff and myself left the company to start up our own company because we couldn't get them to change. We had to do something, so we left and we set up Mercury Sports Footwear.
Right, okay. And Mercury Sports Footwear was like just taking everything you'd learned from Adidas and implementing this new way of being in the UK.
Well, we learned that we had to be different, and we had to modernise. We learned that Adidas is changing. What can we do? So we did quite a few of our own designing and changing things. But the first thing we did, before we left, we started to go to college at night just to learn. You could learn so much on the factory floor at Foster's. That's okay. You could make that shoe. But, there's more to, if you're going to change, if you're going to become more mechanised, more up to date, you've got to learn. So we went to college. Rossendale College was about 10 miles away from the factory, or from Bolton where we lived. And so we went there, and the biggest thing that we picked up were friends. we got to know a lot of people in the shoemaking industry, so that when we wanted anything, we could ask a question: where do you get this from? Where do you get that from? And that was great. That meant that we could find things that Foster's would never find, because they never looked. They didn't see that, and so we made a lot of friends who helped us to pattern cut, helped us to do all the things that we couldn't learn on the floor at Foster's.
So would you say then, Joe, one of the key things that you've learned from your early days is the fact that the more contacts you can make in an industry and in a place that you want to expand into, and the more skills that you can require, the better, so that you can best place yourself to grow in that space yourself?
Well, I think the most important thing is to really embed yourself in the industry, know it fully, get to know it, and people. They're so important. People have always been important as we grew the business. Getting the right people. Having people come to you is good. Advertising for people, okay, maybe on the factory floor, but to build a brand, you have to get people who think like you, who want to become part of your brand. So, yes.
How did you go about doing that, though, Joe? How did you go about attracting the right talent? Because you knew you had something. How did you go about attracting the right talents that you could take your ideas and get the right people on the bus? How did you go about building that in those days?
Well, I mean, it's in those early days, it's pretty hard. But, Jeff was a member of the local athletics club. Excuse me. And it's surprising. There's lots of tradespeople in there. We hardly ever had to do anything ourselves. If we wanted some joinery doing, some plumbing doing, one of the athletes would come and do it for us. They'd love to do it. So you could become part of the community. And once you become part of the community, the running and cycle community, they just used to come to us. Saturday mornings, you couldn't keep people away, whether they wanted to buy a shoe or not. They were coming round to the factory and just trying to be helpful. And I think the reason for that was that we were their age. We were part of. We weren't old and stayed or whatever it is. We were young. We were just. We were athletes at the same time that athletes were coming to us. So we were attracting people who, we'd spend time with, not just sell shoes to. So a lot of people sort of became part of the Reebok community, whether they were buying shoes or not. Buying shoes, yeah, they'd always buy the shoes from us.
But you built a culture around it.
But there was a culture of everybody's part of Reebok, and everybody felt a part of Reebok. And quite a lot of them then started to work for Reebok because we grew and we needed people. We needed people who felt the same that we did, who had that heart, who had that love for the brand.
So when you were Mercury, how did you end up pivoting to go from Mercury to obviously come towards founding Reebok themselves?
Well, we didn't change the company, we just changed the name. And
what was the reason behind that,
Yeah. The reason was that we'd only been working as Mercury for about 18 months. We liked the name. It was great, we thought it was fantastic. And our accountant said, look boys, you're doing well. You're making a bit of money. You're doing okay. You better register your name. And we're naive, in our early 20s. What do you mean, register your name? Because Foster's obviously hadn't registered their name because it was their name. So we said, why? Well, he said, look, if somebody else thinks that these Mercury shoes are good and decide that they'll make some Mercury shoes because it's a good name or whatever, then you're going to have difficulty because you're going to have to prove that that's your name, not
someone
name.
else's. Yeah,
and they can't just use it. So you've got to register that. Oh, okay. So I said, okay, how do we do that? And he sent me along to a guy in Manchester who was a patent agent. And the patent agent, they sort of worked with the registrar. Okay, so I went to see him and told him the story. Look, we've got to change our name. Mercury. We've got to register our name, Mercury. And he looked this up. And he found it was already registered. Lotus and Delta, which is part of British Shoe Corporation. They're big. And he'd also found out they were not using it. They got it registered, but were not using it. And they'd said, yes, your guys can have it for £1,000.
But £1,000 in those days was a hell of a lot of money, wasn't it?
A lot of money. Yeah. We just set up our factory for £250. So
The whole factory?
The whole factory.
For 250 quid?
Yeah. Yeah, we set it up for 250 quid.
What was the average wage of a man for a day there then?
Oh, probably for a day.
Yeah.
I was thinking that for a week we'd probably be paying £15 a week, I would think, at the best.
And you set the whole factory up for £250?
Yeah.
That's mad.
Yeah, it isn't it?
It is. When you just when you think about how much more valuable money was back then, because obviously they've printed a hell of a lot in our economy now, so obviously it brought the value of money down tremendously.
Well, if you think about it, at that time, we used to call $1 5 shillings, which meant there were $4 to the pound. Now it's about 1.25 to 1.30, and the pound has been devalued ever since I've been in business. The pound has been going down, down, down against all currencies. But so in those days, £250, we could buy a machine for £20.
So when you get hit with the fact of like you've got this brand name now that you've obviously established a bit of kudos in the market with, but you can't actually go and use it because you can't register it. What was the kind of process that you went through in terms of finding the name Reebok?
Well, I guess this was probably our first lesson in being entrepreneurs. Our first lesson of, if you want to be in business, you've got to face some of the problems. And this was our first problem to face. And so I went to see the agent, and the agent said, well, if you can't buy it, you've got to bring me 10 names. And I'm looking at him like, 10? Why 10? Well, he said, we've got to go through the process of testing this with the register. And if you give me one, and it takes us 2 weeks, 3 weeks to go test it and find back, you can't have that. Or there's different problems. You'd have to, I think most names are difficult, even if it's phonetics.
Yep.
If it just sounds like it, you could get an objection. So you're going through all these objections. And he said, if you find that 6 of those names don't work, we're 6 months down the road and you've still not got a name. So give me 10. Let's check them all out. So I don't know if you've done this. Sitting down.
Yeah.
Now, what should we call it?
But the thing is, Joe, right? In the meantime, you're testing all these names. What are you calling the shoe in the 6 to 8, 10 months that you're out there in the marketplace?
Well, we didn't take that long. It had to be done quickly. It said 2 or 3. We're still making Mercury.
Yeah,
we're still making that because the guys. The thing is that the guys who owned the register, they were not worried about the fact that we were calling our shoes Mercury. That wasn't a problem for them. They had it registered, which meant that we couldn't protect it. We could use it, but you can't protect it. So we could still keep on using our name, but it's not going to be any good for us long term because we couldn't protect it.
Did they not have a problem with you even using the name though?
No,
because most brands these days, if you were using their name in the marketplace, they'd sue you.
Yeah, but this company is called Lotus and Delta. That's what they're selling under, Lotus shoes.
Yeah,
and they'd probably registered it because one of their models, they'd probably call one model Mercury. Like you could call a car. Ours is called a Fiesta. It's a Ford. Now, if we started using Ford and making cars, you would soon stop it.
You
started making cars and calling them Fiesta. Today they'd probably stop you because now everybody knows names more. But we're talking about shoes and using the name. I mean, we've been using it for nearly 2 years before we were told to register it. So obviously,
not a problem at all. Yeah,
no, there wasn't a problem, and I think that's the reason behind it. Is it wasn't a problem that we were using it. They weren't using it, so they didn't bother. But they had it registered, and we needed to register it so that nobody could use it now that we're using it.
Yeah.
So that was the difference. And as I say, 10 names. How do you get 10 names? And you sit round the table, and they are thinking, Cougar Sports. That's pretty good, isn't it?
Yeah.
Falcon Sports. We were on the sort of birds, animals theme. But I've got to go back to 1943. 1943, middle of the war, I was 8 years old. And just like COVID, you couldn't do anything. You couldn't go anywhere. Seaside holidays were out because there was a war on. You couldn't get petrol. But they did sort of local events. And I was entered into a 60-yard race locally, our local Leverhulme Park. And I won it. Oh, great. I had one big advantage. I'd got Foster's spikes. Can you imagine how many kids would have Foster's spikes?
Yeah.
During the war?
Yeah,
Nobody,
100%.
Nobody. So, yeah, maybe it was a big advantage for me to win the race. Anyway, I win the race. And I go up to collect my prize. And I get a dictionary. And I'm sort of, dictionary? Where's the football? I'm a kid. I'm 8. What do I want with a dictionary?
So you get this at 8 years old, this
Yes,
dictionary?
This dictionary at 8 years old. And on top of that, it's a Webster's dictionary, which probably you don't know, but a Webster's dictionary is an American dictionary. So it's got all the different spellings, like colour without the U, and things like that. So, of course, probably in disgust, I probably flung it at one side when I went home and just got on with life. But now, fast forward to 1960, and I have this dictionary. It's there, sat by my side, and I look at it and I think, Now, I love the letter R. For whatever reason, I don't know. R, to me, was like strong letter to begin any word with. And so I opened my dictionary at the letter R.
This is the first time you've opened this dictionary since you were 8 years old.
No, I'd forgiven it. Over the years, I'd forgiven it and started using it for different various things.
Yeah.
But it was still a bit of a challenge because, say, as an American dictionary, some of these spellings are quite a bit different. But no, it was there as part of what we had in the office, and I opened the dictionary and I'm thumbing through R. Not long to get to R-E-E-B-O-K. Reebok, what's that? It's a small South African gazelle. A gazelle? Wow, we're a running company. Gazelle, running company. Fantastic. That'll do us. And it's a good sounding name, Reebok. Sounds good. Put that at the top of the list. And I went back to the patent agent and said, I've got your list. There's the 10. But I want that one. I want Reebok. The rest, yeah, okay. But we can be in love with Reebok. That's got to be our passion. And of course, he's a lawyer, and as far as he was concerned, okay, Joe, yeah, we'll see. Right. I think it took a week, maybe 10 days before he came back, having searched all these out. And he came back and said, the only one that's really clear, I've got there's just 2 minor problems with it, is Reebok. And I said, great, what's the problems? Now, one is that Tootles have registered the name Railbrook. Oh, yeah, Railbrook. Well, Reebok. He said it's phonetics. They've pretty much near Reebok, Railbrook. But this is Tootles, and they make men's shirts. He said, but they won't complain because he said, I'm their patent agent as well. So, right, great. So
you had a bit of an inside track there, Joe.
Yeah, that's good. The other one was Reebok. And Reebok were ladies' underwear. And he said, I don't think that they're really strong enough to bother about you. So he said, as far as I'm concerned, he said, you're clear to register the name. Right, register the name. He said, but the registrars raised a point that if anybody comes to them and saying we're making shoes out of Reebok skin, you can't stop them. Okay. He said, because of that, you go into the B section of the register. A register's a register. A section, B section. We said, look, so what? We're in the B section. 10 years later, the registrar came back to say, we've moved you to the A section. Oh, great. Why? He said, because everybody now knows that Reebok is a sports shoe, and they don't know it as an animal.
So they literally moved your distinction as Reebok, because more people now knew Reebok as a shoe than they did as the animal as a gazelle.
Yes.
That's mad.
So that's how we became Reebok.
Do you remember some of the other names that you were contemplating having back in those days?
Well, I do remember those 2, which was Falcon and Cougar. I do remember those, yes.
Yeah.
The others are sort of
I think Reebok's way better, to be honest. I'm glad you went with Reebok.
Well, you see, I mean, this is what we're talking about when you go into the business. The first thing we learned by finding Reebok, look, you can improve. A problem can become an advantage. With a problem, you can rework it so it works to your advantage. You can do these things. We were only 4 years into our business when we got a letter from the lawyers of Adidas.
Right.
Yeah. Well, in those days, we didn't have this arrow that we've got now.
Right.
Which is called Vector. We had two bars and a T-bar. So we did T-bar across and two stripes and T-bar. And, of course, Adidas have 3 stripes. And their letter said, look, we think that your silhouette, your 2 stripes and a T-bar, that infringes the Adidas 3 stripes. Well, I mean, Adidas, big company.
How big were they, Joe, when they were approaching you, and what were you turning over at the time, roughly?
They were the number 1 sports brand globally, and our turnover probably about 600,000, maybe 700,000 pounds.
So you get this legal letter, and they're saying, "You look, change your logo, otherwise we're going to go you in court."
That's right. Yeah, and of course, you want this letter, and it's, oh God, what are we going to do? And it doesn't take long before you think, just a minute, Adidas know we're here. Adidas think we're a threat.
See, you're doing what I believe most people should do. You're seeing, because you get 2 chances, Joe, on how you see things. You could have either seen that as a negative, but you've seen it as a positive because you're like, no. Adidas know about us now. They know we're here. They know we're in the marketplace. They feel threatened by us.
Yes.
Even though our turnover is nowhere near them, they're coming to us with a legal letter. So that shows we have something.
Absolutely. That's great. Pin that on the wall. The letter was pinned on the wall for a long time. What should we do? We'll change our silhouette. So what? That's the easy way to do it. And we came up with the Vector, which again is a better silhouette.
It was a betterment, wasn't it? It was a total betterment of everything, everything that you're doing.
That's right. It was a better silhouette than the 2 stripes and T-bar. So, those are the early lessons that you think, well, problems are sent to improve your business, not to kill it.
Problems sent to improve your business, not to kill it. I love it. Because that just shows you the essence of everything what business is about. Because business like life, you got to go through a lot of adversities.
Yeah.
That you think at that time, or certain people can look at and be like, that's, you can look at it from a bad perspective, can't you? But in essence, when you look through your life, things that you perceive as the worst things that ever happened to you often end up to be things that take you to whole new levels of life and being.
Absolutely, because it teaches you that pivoting is the answer. You've got to move, step sideways, whatever it is. Don't try and go through the barrier. There's a way around it, and that way is probably a better way than trying to climb over it or get through it. So it's like it teaches you to think a little bit differently, outside the box. We can take this to our advantage because we have a letter from Adidas. They're lawyers. They're speaking to us. They might not be speaking nice words, but they know we're here.
They know we're here.
Yeah.
So would you say then, from what you've learned in your years and years of business, that it's never about going over the obstacle or through the obstacle? It's always about taking a different direction at that point because that's where the growth is?
Well, I think it's where the opportunity lies. Going straight at something is not necessarily where the opportunity is. The opportunity is the other side of that obstacle. It's like, so why try and go over it if you can go around it? Why, I think the lesson for us was that, like we say, a problem is an opportunity in disguise, whatever it is, and you've got to work out the way. It's just like a puzzle. How can we do this? So we never worried about getting problems. We always thought, well, somebody's paying attention. Somebody's seeing we're here. We're not just something that you can dismiss us. No, we're serious now. And every time you get these problems, you grow a little. You grow. Well, yes. How many footwear companies have Adidas had to write letters to? I don't know, but they wrote to us. And so for us, it's a question of saying, right, people say, were you looking at Adidas like a competitor, or Puma or Nike? And it was never that. We didn't look at them as competitors. They were in the same sort of arena as we were, but we were looking for the white space. We were not looking to sort of go head to head with these guys. Oh, look, they're making this, we must make one. No, what can we make that possibly takes away that business? It's new, it's different. And if you can make something different and new, look for the white spaces. That's where the business is. And originally, that was being in the north of England. The north of England, we have hills, we have fells, and we have fell running. They don't have fell running in Germany. So there's a space.
So you went into these little niches,
yes,
and started to build specific shoes for these niches, and started to build that community and that culture around that.
Around the brand. It was like rugby league. Rugby league again. Rugby union is played throughout the country, but rugby league is the north of England game. So we got all the rugby league teams, and we supplied them with boots. So we built, nearly every rugby league team in the north of England, I had them wearing our boots. So
the whole squad?
Yeah, the whole squad.
All wearing Reeboks?
Yeah.
And what other key areas did you see as like opportune spaces to expand into that maybe Nike and Adidas and Puma weren't going into at the time?
Well, there's things like my problem with expanding. Let me also start with the fact that Jeff and myself started the company.
Right.
But Jeff loved the factory. Absolutely loved the factory. I didn't. If you've read the book, I think I start off with saying I'm a lousy shoemaker. I probably am. But Jeff loved the factory. And so Jeff, and we never had a harsh word between us. My father and uncle had never had a good word between them. We never had. We were 2 years apart, but we never had a harsh word. And Jeff, he said, I'll look after the factory. Joe, you do everything else.
And that suited you down to the ground?
That suited me, yes. It was a bit like, well, what's everything else? But that meant building the business, sales, marketing, ideas, those sort of things. That was more up my street. So I was more into saying, well, how do we now build our sales? And I thought, well, Foster's, they never had a salesman. I mean, these days, the sports trade, you don't have salesmen because now the retailers are so big. Everybody's so big now, they just talk to each other.
Yeah.
In my day, there's about 2, maybe 3 sports shops, small ones, in every town. Probably set up by an ex-footballer.
Yep.
So, and this is what happened in most of the towns. So I would go into these stores and say, I'm Reebok. And the buyer was the owner, probably an ex-footballer. And, oh, right, Reebok, who's that? I said, well, yeah, look, this is my product. Oh, like those, yes, that's a nice product. Yes. But I've got Adidas and I've got Dunlop. Why do I need Reebok? That was a question that hit me. And after I'd had about half a dozen of that same question, why do I need Reebok? I gave up being a salesman. I'm not making any headway with the company because they didn't need Reebok. They had running shoes, they had training shoes, they had football boots, they had, not Reebok, but they had the product. So I thought, I've got to make them want me. Because at this moment in time, they don't. Now, we also used to go around to athletic meetings, and we used to sell our products out of the back of the car.
Yeah.
And running was growing, and people were running 5Ks and 10Ks, and you see a couple of hundred, and I'm thinking, just a minute, these are my customers. This is who I should be selling to. Right. Now, at that time, everybody belonged to a running club. They all belonged, and these running clubs were affiliated to the 3As, the Amateur Athletic Association, and the 3As had a handbook. And every club, it must have been 300-400 clubs throughout the country, there was the name and address of the secretary of every club. in this handbook.
So you literally had all the contacts, your whole database in one book.
In one book. Here, give them a letter to every secretary saying, we'll give you anybody in the club will give 15% off Reebok shoes. But if you'd if anybody in the club would like to be our agent, they can have the 15%. Right. We'll say I send out 300 letters, I get 100. I get 100 agents off that first letter. Then I followed up with another letter and I got another 50 agents. We ended up with getting about 200 agents throughout the UK and sales. Brilliant.
So now you didn't have to go sell anything. You just literally you've got all your agents in the club that just as affiliates of the brand that are just out there distributing and selling shoes within the clubs.
Yeah.
And then I suppose what happened there, Joe, was that people then going into running shops and saying, "Hey, do you sell Reeboks? Do you sell Reeboks?"
You got it.
And then that's how you then got into all the stores and got moving across all the stores like that.
Yeah, because what happened is I start getting telephone calls, retailers in different sports shops. Look, I believe you're selling direct to our club your shoes. And I was yes indeed. Well, I said, and this was a general sort of tone. If you stop selling to them, I'll stock your shoes. Didn't take me long to think about it because I said no. Because to me, whilst this was selling the product, it was also our best marketing tool that we had.
Was them on people's feet running at running clubs,
right.
Setting records.
Yeah. So I said, look, I won't do that, but they're only getting 15% off. You would get them at wholesale price. And I'm sure you would give them 15% off. So you could do exactly what I'm doing. And we will advertise, we'll put your name on our advertising that you're stockists. So, but I'm not stopping selling direct. But a lot of people just prefer to come into your shop and try shoes on. Whereas I've got to send them out by post and we can get, and because in those days, mail order wasn't that big a deal. I mean, now it's everything.
Yeah, direct to consumer now, yeah.
So I think about 90% of them accepted that. And that was good. And by that time, our sales were growing. And by that time, people were looking at us. And eventually I got a company to become our distributors throughout the UK. So I could concentrate then on global.
So you picked a third party for the distribution in those early days as well?
Yes. It turned out to be a bit of a disaster.
What did you learn then from picking that third party distribution? Why was it such a disaster to you at that time?
Well, it shouldn't have been a disaster, and the only reason that it did become a disaster, I can't do that and speak at the same time, but the reason why it became a disaster is that a friend of mine, this company, they just made football boots. They did make rugby boots as well, but they only made boots. And we were making running shoes, training shoes, all the different things that would sort of make a brand. So this guy, he was a friend, good friend, and he said, why don't you let us be your distributors? That way we're offering a full range of stuff. We're already going into sports shops. We're selling our football boots in there. We could now sell your shoes as well. Made a lot of sense. And so, okay, become my distributors. It took about 18 months to 2 years before it fell apart. And the reason it fell apart is that the guy who owned the business, he was getting on a bit. He was in his 70s and he retired. And he put his son-in-law in charge of the business, who knew nothing at all about sports footwear.
And about distribution.
That's right. Yeah. And unfortunately, he and my friend, it's called Derek Shackleton, Shaq, they just didn't get on. So my friend left the company and took the whole sales force with him and went to set up sports division for Barter. Well, the guy didn't know where to go. And so he made a couple of mistakes. And within 12 months, it was going out of business. And, of course, it meant that he had... First of all, he started sending shoes back because they said, they're faulty and whatever. But we soon found out the problem was that he wasn't selling. He'd no salesman. His business was just falling apart. So I got a van, went down to the factory and just picked up all our shoes again, about 2,000 pairs they had, just brought them back to our factory.
And is that when Reebok started to distribute their own shoes?
Well, the biggest problem at that time was cash flow. We had none because all of a sudden, we couldn't make any more shoes. We had to cut our production. Reebok would be 80% of our factory. I did make things for other people.
Just to keep that turnover going?
Well, people come to you and say, will you make this, can you make that? And we made a climbing boot for Ellis Brigham. I don't know if you know Ellis Brigham's.
No, I don't know.
They have about 6 or 8 outdoor stores, a bit like Blacks. I don't know if you know Blacks.
Yeah, I know Blacks.
Like Blacks. Well, Brigham, it's called Ellis Brigham. And I knew him quite well. He was just down the road in Manchester and we were in Bolton, 10 miles away. So he came in and asked if we could make a boot for him. So we made up this boot, just a rock climbing boot. So I was making a boot for him. We were making shoes for 1 or 2 other people as well, but 80% of our production all of a sudden gone. I had to lay off 3/4 of the staff. So with only a few staff left. And
so when you say 3/4, how many staff's that?
Well, it wouldn't be that many, probably about 20. But it was enough at the time. I
bet that kind of hurt you as a brand, someone who's trying to build a brand. Because a lot of these people, then, if there's 20 or 30 people there, you'd know them all first name. You know,
of course, yeah.
You know their families. You know they've got mortgages, all that stuff. I mean, how did you kind of feel about that yourself?
We felt pretty bad about it, but a lot of them said, "Look, we'll work for nothing," and the others said, "Look, when you get over this, can we come back?" And I was saying, "Well, if we get over it, yes, no question on that." But our biggest problem was selling all these shoes. And again, it was a matter of saying, okay, what to do? So we went round to all the schools within about a 50-mile radius, got to know the PE teacher and said, look, you can sell these shoes to your kids at this price. And that was they were half the price that you would get
anywhere else. Yeah.
That you could get them in any shops. But we had to sell. But even then, at half the price, we were getting more than we were getting from the wholesaler, through our distributor. We were getting more of that. It took about 2-3 months, and we cleared all the shoes, and we'd got more money. So we got all our money back. But also what happened, talking about before, earlier, making friends. My friend who had been at our distributors had gone to barter. He came up, he knew what had happened and said, look, can you make me 200 pairs a week of a shoe? We designed a shoe. So he gave me an order for 200 pairs. Another one in Leeds, Stylo shoes, you probably won't know them. But
I don't know.
They wanted 200 pairs a week. So I got 3 or 4 of friends, of retailers who just came out of the woodwork and said, Joe, we know your problem. We'd love to get some of your shoes. Because we were quite the envy of retail, of that sort of trade, the sports goods trade, not football boots, but certainly the athletics side of it. We were quite the envy of a lot of people. They loved our product, and of course, we were selling under Reebok. They were happy to buy from us, our manufacturing, under their name.
Yeah.
So within 3 months, not only had we sold all the shoes off, we'd also got the factory busy again.
And you're now able to employ back all those staff that you had to
employed all the people back again. But another thing that happened is the fact that we were so well known, and the fact that this had happened, that another distributor, a different distributor, came back to us within, say, 6-12 weeks and said, can we be your distributor? So I made a different deal, and yes, they became the distributors for the UK, which again then started to absorb our production. So from almost disaster, we were back up and running within 3 months at full strength. In fact, we were a bit bigger because I'm still making shoes for these other people. Yeah. So we'd actually grown out of it, which was great.
Did you have to then expand the factory then because you took on all this extra production?
We expanded a bit, but there's only so much we could do with expanding the factory because my understanding of it is that we'll never ever be a big company. Like Foster's were never a big company because you need to do more. In those days, you needed to do more than just make sports shoes. We would have needed to be in football, but football was already tied up with Adidas. That would have been a hard game to get into. So my thinking was not so much that we expand our production, but we go to America. We find a bigger market. And if we find a bigger market, we would then probably have other people make our shoes. Barter, they were ready. They would make shoes for us if we wanted our product. So it was a matter of building the name Reebok and the strength of that name. So I decided, well, I'd wanted to go to America and test the market out there because it's a big market.
Yeah, it's a nice pond to play in.
It's massive by comparison to the UK. We, and in terms of numbers, if you put America at 100, the next biggest market was Japan at about 30. And then I think Germany was 25 and the UK about 18. You know, that was our size of market that we were dealing with. And luckily for me, I'm reading a magazine and the government were advertising it. And they were saying, look, we'd like you to advertise, we'd like you to export, and we will pay for you a stand at the NSGA show in Chicago. That's the National Sporting Goods of America. We'll pay for your stand, we'll pay for your return airfare, and we'll pay for half of your expenditure whilst you're out there, your hotel bills, etc. Well,
it's a gift. It's an absolute gift. Yeah.
You know, when luck comes, and that was lucky. But this was 1968, and I'm trying to get into America. I didn't get in there until 1979.
Why did it take you so long to break into American market?
Well, American market's a big market. You know, you can think, how do you get everybody in the UK to know your product? Well, if you go back, yes, we had Athletics Weekly, we had some magazines that we could advertise in, but to get everybody to sort of know, I needed to get into all the sports shops. Now I'd got into the sports shops. How do I get into the sports shops in America? 1968, I'm there in Chicago, and I don't advise you to go there in February. It's not the right time.
Not the right time to go to Chicago.
No, in Chicago, no. So, and again, the guys, they look and say, well, it's a great product. Where do we get your product from? And I'm saying England. Oh, England? Yeah, is that New England? No, it's not New England. No, it's England, you know, over the water, Europe. Oh, near London. Yeah, near London. And it was like, well, look, guys, you get somebody over here, we can buy them over here. We'll certainly try your product.
You have to be over here.
You have to be over here. You have to have a distributor. And so I had 6 failed attempts at getting a distributor. They tried it. Didn't work.
What was the key? What was the key element that was making it fall down over there, Joe? In terms of like, what were these distributors, in your opinion, doing wrong that was stopping them breaking into that market for so long?
Well, I think that why it didn't work is the fact that it was the same as when I went to the retailer. I went to my retailer and they'd say, Reebok? Who's Reebok? Why do I need Reebok?
So no one knew who you were.
Yeah, you know, it's like, how do you get people to accept that? Okay, we were selling the odd, Rogers, some of the top athletes. Frank Shorter actually bought some shoes. He was a top athlete in America. Ron Hill won the Boston Marathon in a record time in our shoes. But it's getting that message out. But the big thing that changed is that right from the beginning of the 70s, probably late 60s, running became an item in America. People wanted to get fit, and running was simple. Just a pair of shoes, out you go. By 1975, running was big, and with it was a magazine. The magazine started at late 60s as a single page. That was Runner's World. Right. Started as a single A4 sheet. By 75, it's 50 pages of colour and everything you needed to know about running where to go, who won the last races, where the last races were, where the next races are. So everybody running buys the magazine. Well, in America, you'd got 350 million people, and probably 10% of those at that time were out running. They've got per trainers, and they were out running and doing 5Ks, 10Ks, you name it. And Runner's World, they all bought Runner's World. And Bob Anderson, he was the publisher of Runner's World. And he decided, because, I mean, he was a big influence, he decided to tell everybody which was the number one running shoe. Well, great. Nike, of course, number one running shoe. Well, if we are saying that 10% of the Americans, 363, maybe 35 million now running, 10% of those would probably want to get the number one shoe. The Americans are like that. So 10% want the number one shoe. 3.5 million people all of a sudden want that shoe. And Phil Knight, Nike, he's importing his shoes, of course, from Japan. Had he got any chance of fulfilling those orders? No.
Not a chance.
No chance. No chance. You couldn't just turn up the quantities in no time. It couldn't happen. 12 months later, when the quantities started to come through, well, Bob Anderson decides, we've got to do this every year and find out which is the number one shoe. So he has a different number one shoe. This time, I think it's a New Balance or Brooks, whatever. So, of course, all of a sudden, people want that shoe. And so the demand for the Nike shoe goes off just as the product's coming in. So the retail trade, you can imagine what the retail sports shops were thinking. This is madness. Now, either Bob Anderson or somebody told him, this is not working. You're creating havoc. So he changed it. Instead of doing number one shoe, he changed it to star ratings. So a 5-star shoe, if you had a 5-star shoe and you could have 4 or 5, that was the top. So there could be 4 or 5. And I knew at the time we could make a 5-star shoe. Making a number one shoe, that was a bit of a lottery. It depends on what his choice would be.
But you knew you could land one at the 5 stars.
We knew we could make a 5-star shoe. And we did. And that's what got us in. Aztec. Aztec was our 5-star shoe. But I've been, in 1978, I was at the NSGA show again, turning up. And running being that big, now Kmart are a big retailer.
Massive in Australia too,
yeah. And they came up and said, we want 25,000 pairs of Reebok. Bit of a gamble because, we were just a name. But we hadn't made any big headways in America at all by then. So, at that point we hadn't got we had a 5-star shoe in my mind, but it obviously wasn't.
It wasn't signed off 5-star.
Not signed off by Runner's World, and so I said 25,000. Well, that's right, fantastic. Now, I knew if we did get a 5-star shoe that we won't help, and this is where my friend in Barter now, he was happy. We'll make the shoes for you. 25,000 pairs, that would be good. Can do that. But then came out and said, but we need a better price. We knew what a better price meant. That meant going to South Korea. Because they could do them at half the price that we could do them, or less than half the price. So, again, I did realise that if we were going to get into this game properly, we would need to go to Asia. We need to get to South Korea. So I had already made acquaintance of the rep or the company that represented the big South Korean group. So we were in with them, and I thought, okay, well, we can do that.
Was it hard for you to let go of UK manufacturing?
Well, in a sense, you don't let go of UK manufacturing. What you're doing is you're keeping that small factory to do specials. Doing different things. And we were looking now at a different market. We were looking at this training market. The training shoes, people just going out running on the roads. Nothing to do with spike track shoes or track and field event shoes. And we were doing those still in our small factory. If you're moving into the big production, you can't build a factory just like that. It can't happen overnight. But those factories were there in South Korea. So I knew if we got the 5-star shoe, we would need help. And at the same show in 1978, Paul Feynman came along. Well, 1979, yeah, 1979. Paul Feynman came along and said, Joe, I'd love to be a distributor. He ran a small wholesaler, Boston Camping they were called, and they they sold tents, ground sheets, fishing rods, you name it. And I got on well with Paul. It was only a small business, and I think they'd been doing the same business for about 10 years, not making any headway or whatever. I could see he was a bit fed up with it, and Paul saying, Joe, you get a 5-star shoe and I'll be your distributor. This is February. The shoe edition doesn't come out till August. So, okay. So we all go back home. I go to America in May. I think it was May or June. I went to see Kmart and saw the guy who said he wanted 25,000 pairs. He still wanted 25,000 pairs. But I was sent from reception, I was sent to this room with about 60 desks with old buyers. And I'm thinking, this is just one small piece of this operation. And if the sales don't stand up to whatever they expect out of a square metre, that will be my first and last order for 25,000 pairs. That will be it. So I went along to Boston to see Paul. And he's there. He's running this company with his brother and his brother-in-law. And it's small, it's nice, and they have a sales team. I'm thinking, this would be nice. It would be a nice bolt-on here. So the last week in July, that's when the August edition of Runner's World comes out, and we're waiting. And I phoned Paul and said, Paul, just go down to the kiosk, will you, and just see if the Runner's World's out now and see how we did. An hour later, he comes back and said, Joe, Aztec, you got it. 5 stars. We got 5 stars. I said, but not only that, your Trax bag, Inca, that got 5 stars. And also your Midas, your racing shoe, that got 5 stars. So that was the difference. With 3 5 stars, that pulled us into America. We got it on the hook.
And what was the difference? When they said, so what was the first order of shoe after that 25,000 initial? What was the first order? What was the volume after that?
Well, Paul placed his orders with Barter because Barter could actually make the shoes straight away. Going into Korea was good, and he ordered 20,000 pairs. Right. So, and he almost got 25. But he ordered 20,000 pairs. Yeah, if you read the book, you find out it was quite a disaster, and yet in a way it worked. They got things wrong, and you need to read that story. It's amusing, but at the same time, Paul never paid for the shoes because the deal was direct between Barter and Paul. Right. I didn't get in the way of it. I would just get my royalties out of that. But
right, so that's when Reebok started to sell shoes like with royalty payments rather than manufacturing them all themselves. Yeah. So this is where you went into more licensing agreements then.
We didn't. Well, it depends whether they call them licensing agreement. Probably yes. That's distribution agreements. So we made distributors. So we got distributors around the world after America, but we needed America to start and really start to grow.
So when you sell and when you package some form of distribution as a shoemaker, as a brand like Reebok, do you then obviously you design and you create this classic shoe here that I'm wearing right now. Yeah. You design it. You approve that. You approve that in your little factory. You send that over to America, and then you license them to be able to go and make that and get that sewn anywhere. So you send all. You send when you're setting up a brand like that and distributing that. Do you send them like a CAD drawing of a shoe and how it's put together, and then they manufacture it, or how does that work?
Well, in those days we didn't have CAD drawings. And computers weren't even known in the early 80s. Early 80s. We didn't have computer work. Computers were very. It's quite new when you think about it, computers.
So how do you then quality control, Joe, that when you're putting this into America, that if I bought a pair of Reeboks in America and a pair of Reeboks in the UK and a pair of Reeboks somewhere else, how do I know that even though they're all made in different factories by different distributors, how do we get the same shoe?
Well, the licensing process is twofold. One is your distributor who's going to be selling the shoes. Yeah. The other one is a manufacturer who's going to be making them. And they both have to have an agreement. They both have to have paperwork.
Yep.
And you get the manufacturer to, you actually show them how to do it. They make a shoe, a pair of shoes, and they call them sealed samples. They go into a plastic bag. They've got all the description, all the different things that you've used, whatever it is, all the specifications. The bag is sealed. They keep one, and your distributor keeps the other one. So that when the product comes out, it's got to be to that specification, and it's got to look like that shoe.
So that's how they guaranteed it in those days. Yeah. In terms of like that's to be.
They still do it today.
Really,
sealed samples are still the thing that happens today. And once you've made it, you've got your spec on it. The whole thing is there, and it's sealed up, so that you've got one shoe and they've got the other shoe.
And this is for every order. So if I ordered 25,000 pieces of those to be made,
yeah,
you'd get a seal sample. I'd get a seal sample, and then when I get the 25,000 pieces turn up and land in the shipment, I can check my seal sample against those shoes.
Against the production, yes.
Right. I love that. Yeah. I love that. It's so simple, but it kind of like guarantees the quality.
Absolutely, because if anything goes wrong, you can just get to your seal sample and you compare it.
Right.
And this is what Barter did wrong. Barter being a shoemaker, not a sports shoemaker, there's a big difference. And as you can see, the shape on the face in here.
Yeah.
What Barter did, because they're looking at time and motion, what's quicker, they rounded this. They made this round,
right,
so that the machinist could just sew round it
instead of two separate sewing pieces.
Slow down, and yeah. So it takes longer to sew a facing on like this. This is a facing. It takes longer than something which is very simple and round, but it changes the look of the shoe. As soon as you do that, it changes the whole look of the shoe, which is what they did, and that was one of the reasons that that Paul Farmer didn't pay for the product. The other one was that this midsole here is called EVA, and EVA at that time was very, very new.
What does EVA mean?
It's vinyl. I've forgotten what it is. It's an expanded vinyl acetate, I think. EVA, expanded vinyl acetate.
And this was the new form of sole in those days, right?
It was new because it's not rubber; it's a plastic.
Right.
And but Barter were that big as a company. They had their own rubber factory, so they produced their own rubber. And these things are produced in rubber factories, but they hadn't produced EVA before, and so they started to make EVA. Probably 90% of it was good, but 10% was uncured, so that when it compressed, it stayed compressed. It just flattened. So a lot of shoes would be made in that 10%. What happened is that when they went to America and America sent them, Paul Farmer's getting shoes back.
Right, okay.
And I hadn't seen the production, but not only had they changed the appearance, they had this problem with the EVA. It was collapsing.
Yeah.
And Paul Farmer's having to just send shoes out. And his decision was, okay, not everything's coming back, so I'll just exchange them, no questions. So we was exchanging shoes. And when it came to paying for the shoes,
yeah,
I keep losing that.
Yeah.
When it came to paying for the shoes, Paul came over and we went down to Barter and met up with the guy who was the head there and said he wanted to sort of say, look, we'll let you have half price. And Paul said, no, I'm not paying for one of these. I'm not paying you at all because you've almost ruined my business. Well, it did. I mean, it's almost ruined Reebok. It wouldn't had it been anywhere else but America.
Because the Americans didn't know the style, so they couldn't pick they couldn't pick that fault from the sewing.
Well, they not only didn't know the style, the American attitude to things is it's new, it's different. Give it a try. Don't worry about it. If it fails or whatever, we'll try it again. You know, in the UK, if something like that happens, everybody just gives you a bad name.
Washes your hands with you.
That's right. Yeah. But over there it didn't. And so Paul Farmer got 20,000 pairs of shoes and didn't pay.
So that allowed you a little bit more cash flow to launch even bigger in the market.
It allowed time for us to get career online and working, and keep Paul satisfying its customers.
And when you get a factory like in Korea that can make shoes, I mean, how many what's the kind of volume can a factory like that turn out for you?
Well, I'm just saying they call them production lines, and I think in a production line they had to make, I think it's 1,000 pairs a day. So you had to be able to order enough for 1,000 pairs a day for a production line. So if you wanted a production line, you could have a day on a production line, and that means you've got 1,000 pairs. So you multiply up your days and you multiply production lines.
Yeah.
So if a factory has 10 production lines and he's working for 200 days, you multiply, that's about 2 million or whatever it is. Pairs of shoes. There's a lot of footwear, but that's how they sell the production line.
When you're going into a new market like America or any new market, how do you calculate or forecast how many pairs you're going to sell?
We don't. The distributor has to. The guy you go to,
right,
who you're going to give a license to, he has to come up with what he's going to sell. It's not up to us. He knows his market,
and he's just trying to judge that on what he's previously sold. So so really, then no one has a clue, really.
Not really, because it's like anything else. If you're a very well-known brand and you've been there for a long time, maybe you've got some idea, but otherwise it's just a matter of sticking your finger in the air and which way's the wind blowing.
So, because I'm sure I read somewhere that after you'd been in America a while, didn't you and Phil Knight, who had Nike, didn't you have a bit of a to-do or something like that?
Probably after I retired. That it certainly wasn't with me and Phil Knight. I think I know that what made Reebok grow was aerobics.
Right.
Not running.
Yeah.
Aerobics happened because our guy who was a tech rep down in Los Angeles, Arnold Martinez, his wife was going to aerobic classes and coming back absolutely full of it. And Arnold was saying to Frankie, he said, "Frankie, what are you doing?" I said, "It's aerobics. What's that?" "Well, it's exercise into music." "Really?" "Yeah." And they were full of it, loved it. And Arnold went to the next session, and he saw the instructor in a pair of sneakers. We think they were New Balance. Half the class were in the same sneaker. The other half were wearing no shoes at all. And that's where Arnold got this idea. Why don't we make a specific shoe for these girls? So just on women's sizes, on a woman's last, make it out of glove leather. And, wow. So he went up. He's in Los Angeles. He went up to see Paul Feynman in Boston. That's an overnight flight. And he sits with Paul, and he's telling Paul, "Fantastic, all that's going on." And Paul's saying, "Slow down. Oh, I know, slow down. Why do we want to be making dancing shoes? We're a running shoe company." And no matter what Arnold said, Paul was into sort of, yeah, we'll keep our eye on it. But, let's not get too excited at this point because few girls dancing down there in Los Angeles. Arnold went down to the back door and had a word with Steve Liggett.
Yeah.
And he had more, he convinced Steve more than he did do Paul that we should be doing this. And Steve got him some samples, I think about 200 pairs of samples. And he got them down there in LA, gave them to the instructors. And a lot of the leading girls down there, and they loved them. They just loved the shoes. They loved the shoes. They were wearing the shoes to work. They would just put them on. They were so comfortable.
Is this where you first came up with the classic, the Reebok Classic?
Classic came later.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, it was the aerobic shoe. It was made out of glove leather, which was a mistake in one way.
Just because of how it wasn't very well wearing.
Yeah, with glove leather's 0.7 of a millimetre thick.
Yeah.
Now, 0.7 of a millimetre, if you've got sort of that in your mind, that's very thin. And then you have to take some of the surface off in order for the adhesive to stick.
Yeah.
And so it takes it down to 0.5 millimetre. By that time, there's hardly anything there. So wear it for a short while and wear it down at the bottom of the upper there where it meets the sole. it starts to bend and it just breaks away. So that didn't work, and I didn't know they were making them out of glove leather until somebody said, we've got a problem. Oh, why? They said, you shouldn't be making shoes out of glove leather. And on saying that, we did. Reebok made shoes out of glove leather, but we reversed it, so we just used it on suede. So the reverse side was suede, and so you didn't have to take anything of the substance away.
Right, okay,
Right?
yeah.
And so we used suede, but now that we're using the grain side, and having to take that off, that was disaster. So I said, you don't do that. Well, we want it. So what did they do? They lined it with nylon. I said, you can't line it with nylon because leather breathes. You know, you're getting people up there, they're doing a workout and they get hot. Leather breathes. Nylon doesn't. So what did they do? They punched holes in the front, like we've got in the front here. It's now become a style, but they punched a nice set of holes in the front to allow the
leather and the nylon to breathe together.
To allow it to breathe, yeah. Which just proves that marketing knows more than shoemaking. You know, it was a marketing decision to do these things.
So that was literally a marketing decision, so that you could then put more shoes out, without having to change the build.
Well, without changing the leather, eventually the leather changed, and we got thicker leather, more like garment leather, so that they could actually work on it without putting the nylon at the back. So yeah, and of course, what happened then? We were a $9 million business at the time in America. In 5 years' time, I mean, just under 5 years' time, we'd gone from 9 million to 30 million to 90 million to 300 million to 900 million.
Hold on, you'd gone from 9 million to 900 million in 5 years in America.
In America,
from your aerobic shoe alone.
Yeah, well, the rest was in there, but the aerobic shoe was the big one. I mean, that's the thing that really took off, and that's what made Reebok.
And in terms of volume, Joe, with that, from 9 million to 900 million, what's the volume change on the amount of shoes you're putting out?
Well, this is the problem. Because it wasn't too bad to get up to 300 million as revenue, but to get from 300 million to 900 million, that's tripling your production needs. And we would have never done that, but for the fact that Nike hit a wall. All of a sudden, Nike hit this problem. They'd been growing fast, and they had to pull out of 3 factories, and so that's how we managed to get the volume.
So you jumped into Nike's old factories.
That's right. Yeah.
And managed to use them to produce this aerobic shoe and then take. So most businesses say that expanding at the top end is easier than expanding at the bottom end, but you just said that it was that much harder going from 300 to 900.
Well, it's not hard in as much as the fact that you can sell them all. You know, this was nothing to do with selling. The demand was there. The demand was absolutely incredible. So what the problem was is getting the production, increasing the production over such a short time. As I said earlier, with Nike, when they got the number 1 from Runner's World, and he's importing these from Japan, he had no chance. He couldn't get the increase in production because the factory couldn't increase that quickly. You have to move out of factory to factory. So that sort of process takes a while.
So in essence, then, because of the way that you'd built Reebok compared to the way Nike had built their brand, that you had access to more production than they had.
Well, no, I don't think we had access to more production because Nike had never made a shoe. They always imported. You know, they used to be the Tiger.
So I didn't realise this. So basically, they were just using Tiger to produce the Nike shoe, and they just created the brand that slaps on the front of it.
Yes.
Yeah. So was Nike then from concept just a brand that was like a marketing brand put on top of a shoe then?
Yes, just a marketing brand. Well, I think it was Bill Bowerman as well as Phil Knight, but probably Bill Bowerman actually did the work of designing a shoe. Yeah, they just designed, and the waffle sole became something that Bill Bowerman, they wanted that, and Nike, Onitsuka as the company, they they just didn't want to be bothered. No, you're selling Tiger, we don't want to be bothered. You're not designing our shoes, we design them. So, but they got them and said, well, look, okay then, this is our shoe we want. Now we want our name on it. And I think somebody came up with the idea of Nike because they were Blue Ribbon Sports. Blue Ribbon Sports in America were selling Tiger.
Right.
But because Tiger just didn't want to be told how to make shoes, they did make the shoe that Blue Ribbon wanted, but of course they had to put their own name on it, and they came up with Nike. Put Nike,
right?
Nike on it. Put Nike on it. So that's how they started. They never made shoes. They've got technicians now. They employ a lot of technicians because they're a $25 billion company now. They're really big.
Yeah.
And so they have all the technicians you need, who would now go out to whatever country they're making shoes in
and set it up. Yeah.
Set it up. But in those early days, no. I mean, they just had runners, and they had some people who would sort of do some selling or whatever. But they were not shoemakers.
When you started to do 900 million a year in sales in America alone, were there other brands then at this point coming to you to look to acquire you?
Not at that time, no. I don't think anybody looked to acquire Reebok. I think Reebok were looked upon as they're growing. So nobody came along. We became number one. We overtook Nike, we overtook Adidas, and became number one global shoe brand. We were doing about 4 billion.
4 billion?
Yeah.
And what year was that?
We're talking late 80s, I say 80, 88, 89.
Yeah, the year I was born, so 33, 34 years ago. So tell me about how this, because this is an institutional shoe, this.
Yeah, it's now.
This was on every kid that I went to school with.
Right.
We all had a pair of Reebok Classics.
Yeah.
Everyone in the UK has had it. Everyone I know from my childhood had a pair of Reebok Classics. I still see them everywhere now. Who came up with this concept for the Reebok Classic, and how was it born?
Well, really, all the Reebok Classic did was to combine the soft leather that we'd now developed for the aerobics, and put that onto a classic, say, a road training shoe, and then it became street. Just like with Adidas, they used to do training shoes, and all the kids used to buy the Nike, the Adidas training shoes. It became street, and this just became such a big business because the soft leather made the difference. Right now, unfortunately, these are not made out of the same soft leather.
Right. Yeah.
I do have pairs. These are soft. You can see the difference between the leather you've got.
Yeah.
And this.
Yeah, 100%. That's way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You see, this is where obviously this, as the brand's been taken over, things have changed that you wouldn't do. But I see that soft leather on the toe of yours. Yeah. I remember my shoes being like that, because what type of that is just a different kind of quality, isn't it, altogether?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is a split leather. I doubt that's a grain. I think it's more printed. They paint it very heavily. I mean, if you look inside your shoe, it's lined.
Right.
Your shoe will have a fabric liner.
Yeah.
They never had fabric liners. You didn't need a fabric liner. It's because that's what helps it give some substance to it.
And how close is this classic now that I'm wearing, this modern classic? How close is that in design to the way it was like the original? Has it changed much, or is it
very much the same?
Very much same construction.
Yeah, same. I mean, this is the sole that I designed. It's changed slightly because they just have different techniques. But this is the sole I designed in 1977.
How proud must you be then to walk down the street, Julie, wherever you're out in the world, seeing people wearing these and knowing that you designed that?
Well, it is incredible when you think about it, but I've had a long time to think about it.
Yeah, yeah.
It's not as though it's happened yesterday. It's a long time since it started, and I'd like to see more. In fact, we will see more now that ABG have got the brand. And Adidas have moved over. It'll come out from under the shadows, and we'll see more.
Before we go into you selling it and everything like that, I just want to touch upon this because not many podcasts include this, but I think it's so important. It's like, how important has it been for you to have someone like Julie sit in the background and support you and facilitate you for all this growth? Because not a lot of people hear about the wives that sit there in the background as well and help and get everything going. So just talk me through that.
Well, it didn't start that way. I mean, what has happened? I wrote the book. Since writing the book, there's been such a demand now, it's sort of come on. So now we're selling Joe Foster.
Right.
And if it wasn't for Julie, we wouldn't be doing that. You know, she makes all the arrangements. People, I mean, now that we have smartphones and Instagram, all this, people are now making contact. And Julie picks up the contacts. We talk backwards and forwards, and Julie then, she keeps the whole diary, sets the whole diary up, and I go along and I speak to you. Well, I mean, right now, in a couple of days' time, I'm 87. So I don't have the same energy that I had when I was 30 or 40. You need energy. And so I go along now. Julie drags me into places and sit down, speak.
Yeah. Well, it's good though, because I think a lot of people, like, obviously Julie's, since you've been together then,
yes,
Julie's encouraged you to tell your story, come on podcasts like this and other people's podcasts and stuff, and really tell your story, which helps a lot of young entrepreneurs and young people who aspire to, to take a brand from zero concept to get them to turn over 4 billion a year. You know what I mean? That's a hell of a lot of movement.
Well, I mean, I say there's an awful lot of luck in there, and you do get luck. Some people say, well, if you stay around long enough, you're there and you're there at the right time, which happened for Reebok. The fact that running became such a big thing in America got us into America. But if running had not happened at that time, if it had been 10 years later, maybe we wouldn't have happened. Nothing would have happened. Would I still been around at that time? So there
has to be a lot of luck then. There has to be a lot of luck. You believe that, yeah?
Oh, I believe that, yes. Some things happen and some things you've got a lot of bad luck. But like we say, bad luck is usually sort of thought of as problems, and that's when you turn your problem around and turn the luck into it, turn it into lucky. So having problems can be good because it can turn things around, but certainly good timing. And good timing, it's that good luck. And largely, yes, it's good luck. The fact that running came up in America, Runner's World became a big magazine that everybody... So we became visible.
But you still had to have the ingenuity to go and catch the waves that you caught. So even though, there was quite a lot of lucky breaks, but I believe everyone has lucky breaks in business. You have to, like you say, but you still managed to catch those waves and ride those waves when doing it. And it's no small feat to go from 9 million to, even from 0 to 4 billion. Do you know what I'm saying? It's an amazing journey. What in your estimation, from 0 to 4 billion, how many years was that as a business?
To 4 billion, that's we're talking about mid-80s, and if we say from 60 to mid-80s, that's 25, about 25, 26 years. 25, 26 years,
yeah. So that in itself identifies of why you have to stay the path of what you're on and be relentless with it.
Yeah, quarter of a century,
yeah. Talk to me about when the offer came in to acquire the business and how that kind of came about.
Well, the offer didn't come in to acquire the business. The option was how do we take advantage of aerobics? How do we do that?
Right.
What is going to be the answer? And the answer was we need money. Paul Feynman, he didn't have money. We didn't have money, but we knew somebody who did.
And how much money did you equate needing to expand into that market?
We didn't, because we weren't looking for a figure. This wasn't a financial sort of an agreement.
Right.
What we wanted was an open credit line, so that as we expanded, the credit would just come in. So it was just a matter of being able to get the product and pay for it.
When you're turning over that amount of money, though, Joe, isn't it quite easy to go to any big major bank and get a credit line?
When you're doing it, yes. But to get there, to start there...
Right, okay.
Yeah. The banks need collateral, and Paul Feynman had a bit, I had a bit, but we didn't have the collateral that would satisfy a bank that, okay, you've got things that would sort of repay this money. No, we needed a businessman, and we got Stephen Rubin.
And Stephen Rubin was who back then?
So back then he was Pendling back then, and it was his. I would say his biggest income would probably be as someone who sourced products in the Far East. And that's what he did. He sourced product. His company, one of his companies called ASCO, sourced product out of Korea. And so in sourcing that, he had a percentage. He had so much on the product. Maybe, I don't know, 10p, 50p, whatever, per product he would take. And that made him money. But also, he owned a couple of brands. He owned LS. He still does. In fact, the Sporting Goods Intelligence, at the time when everything was really at the top there, they called us numero uno. They called Nike Eager Beavertons, because they came from Beaverton. Eager Beavertons. And Stephen Rubin was called Mr. Sneaker, because he actually once had the opportunity to buy Adidas and turned it down.
Does he count that as one of his biggest regrets?
I have not asked him. I think he probably wouldn't.
No, I think everything that's meant for you happens for you anyway, as a natural byproduct of you being in this world. What when you're acquiring this credit line to get this capital to obviously scale it to the 4 billion, at what point in turnover were you looking for this credit line, like 50 million, 100 million, or what were you turning over then?
I don't think anybody wanted to put a figure on it, but I know that Paul Feynman said that we owe Stephen 20 million, and he's getting a bit worried.
Right. Yeah. It's a hell of a lot of money.
That must have grown a lot more.
It's a hell of a lot.
Yeah. Well, if you think that Stephen Rubin he's JD Sports, and JD Sports are a £7 billion operation now. So they've grown.
That is mad.
Yeah.
That is mad. And you and him are still friends today?
We exchange emails. He's read my book.
That's good. No, that's good. He's smashed it, because obviously, like, he's now all over Australia. I don't know if he's gone into the American market yet, but I know he has gone into the American market.
In fact, he's done a deal with Reebok now for Europe and America.
That's mad.
And USA. So he's got a good deal going with them.
That's mad. When you think about the Northern England and the brands that have come out of Northern England, it's quite astounding to see some of the global brands that have coming out of the Northern England.
Absolutely, yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So in regards to, like, obviously when you got this credit line, you had to give away equity for that, right?
Yeah.
What kind of piece of equity did you have to give away to get this credit line?
Well, I did the whole deal, because as far as I was concerned, this wasn't about Joe Foster. This was about Reebok.
So you gave away 100% right then?
Yeah.
For a cash exit?
Well, no, yeah, to make sure that Reebok grew. Reebok had to have that opportunity. For me, that was it. We could be a small company. We would, if we hadn't have taken advantage at that time of the aerobics market, if we hadn't have taken it, Reebok could have just faded.
But most people would have retained some form percentage within the brand, or some form of royalty payment stuff. But you decided to cash all chips.
Well, it was where do you go for your money? Where do you get it? And in those days, and we're talking about the 80s, early 80s. The money that you can do these days and the deals you can do these days. I got a good deal. Don't get me wrong. The deal was good for me.
Yeah.
And whichever way anybody wants to talk now, I'm still the founder.
Yeah.
And I will always be the founder. And how much money do you need? And so money wasn't the objective. The objective was succeeding at doing the one thing you want to do, and that's get a world-leading brand.
I love that, because you've clearly wanted then your whole life since founding that brand. All you've wanted to do is see Reebok win at all levels.
Absolutely.
And you forgoed a massive amount of money to make that that dream a reality, to where you now walk around, you might be walking around Portugal or south of France and see people with Reebok Classics on their feet because you did that deal?
Well, people ask me, do you regret doing things? And no, I don't regret. Reebok became number one.
Yeah.
You know, what more do you want? It's like, if I hadn't have done that, would Reebok have become number one? Would you be talking to me now?
Yeah.
Because we're trying to change something that happened in the 1980s, early 80s. If it had changed that, maybe Reebok wouldn't have seen aerobics. Maybe,
Yeah.
So it's like trying to think that, why did you do that? Well, why I did it the purpose was to give Reebok that ultimate opportunity. And it worked. And that worked. So what we're talking about today is because of the choices I made. If I'd have made a different choice, maybe we might not have made it.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. I love the fact that you loved what you were doing so much that you wanted to give it that opportunity.
Yeah.
So it was originally Adidas that then came and acquired after that?
Adidas did in 2005, but I've been retired since 1990.
Yeah.
I had nothing to do with that deal, or the deal which has gone through now, which ABG have got the brand. But what ABG will do, which Adidas didn't do, Adidas sort of kept Reebok in the shadows. Now because ABG are fantastic at licensing, and they're making the brand visible globally.
Yeah,
it will be
getting it on the right places in the store, getting it on the right athletes,
getting it in the stores, because Reebok, we were $4 billion. It's been acquired by ABG, and when it's acquired by ABG for $2.5 billion, the revenue, the turnover had gone from $4 billion down to $1.5 billion. So Adidas had seen it drop down that far.
Yeah.
Now, by the end of next year, even ABG is saying that we'll be back at $5 billion, just by merely making it visible, available, visible throughout globally. It will be back to $5 billion.
And that's the power of having someone who's got all those like marketing agencies and all that in-house, all these brands under umbrella group, and then they can push out to the mainstream and have distribution day one. Yeah,
they just do deals with major distributors, major retail groups, and like JD, they've done a deal there, so JD will get a good piece of money out of that product. And ABG, they'll get more like a royalty rather than building a brand. However, I don't know. I think if I was ABG, I'd get the brand back to $5 billion or maybe more. Then I'd float it as a separate brand, because they'd not only get the money back, they could also still own more than 50% of the company.
Right, I love that. See, they build it to $5 billion sales, sell 50%, make their $5 billion back, so they're in for zero. Then they've got this brand, 50% of a brand that's worth X amount of multiple.
Well, then and it will grow. And these days, sport is on every street in the country. We're fashion now. Everybody's, Nike didn't like the idea of being a fashion company, but now they've got to accept the fact they're a fashion company.
Yeah.
Just like Adidas, just like Reebok, and Under Armour, you name them. They're now fashion companies. But I think Reebok's going to go big again. Really big.
If you were running Reebok today, what is the biggest deal that you'd go out and do if you were running it today?
The problem with running it today is you need to be up to date with what the market is. So you'd need to get an awful lot of market information. I mean, I've had my period of time. Yep. That's why, as far as I was concerned, I wasn't worried about handing the company on. You get to a point.
You did your rodeo. Yeah.
Now, the best thing I could do is to let Reebok, can it make the top? Can it? And it did. It was brilliant. It became number one. And it's gone down since then. Why? There are numerous reasons why. Obviously, not the right people at the top running the brand. But now it's with ABG, and Shaq O'Neal loves Reebok. Shaq became a Reebok man right from leaving college. And so, with him behind it, with a lot of people there, it's going to grow again.
Were you one of the, before you left the company, were you one of the ones that kind of were responsible for putting those kind of deals together, or was that after your time?
No, there was most of that was after my time.
Yeah.
And most of it was in America. For me, the thing to do, and I had this, I talked to Paul numerous times, like, Paul, look after America. Don't worry about the rest of the world. Just look after America, because the rest of the world, that'll come along. That will follow easy. But, do it right in America.
And so throughout your career and tendency as a CEO, founder of Reebok, you've obviously learned a hell of a lot of lessons in life, Joe, that kind of, that a lot of young entrepreneurs or young people in business that listen to this podcast, would love to hear what you'd say as if you could give like 5 pieces of advice, Joe, right? 5 pieces of advice or a few pieces of advice, that your golden nuggets, in terms of you can't take anything with you when you leave, but you can just leave these golden nuggets for these people to pick up. What kind of advice would you give to the younger people out there that are trying to build brand, trying to build their legacy in what they're doing?
Well, the first 3 are fun, more fun, and a lot more fun. If you're not enjoying it, it's difficult. Making it will, if you do make it, it'll be torture. So you've got to enjoy it. That's the most important thing you can do, enjoy it. The other thing is that today, know technology all the way through, because you need to know social media, you need to know everything about it. Be in control of your media. Just know everything, because that is so important, because now social media is driving such a lot of business. This is where it's going. So if you know that, you're in there, but do have fun. Major thing is to have fun. And of course, know your product. Like we did, we could make a 5-star shoe at the time when we needed to know how to make a 5-star shoe.
Right.
And today, whatever it is that you're doing, you've got to be top dog. You've got to know everything about it. And you've not got to be copying somebody. You've got to be looking for that white space.
Right, okay.
That's so important, to look for the white space, the place where somebody isn't. Let people follow you.
Yeah, I love it. I've distilled so much knowledge from you throughout this podcast. I tell you now, Joe, I'm learning a lot about myself by listening to the way that you articulate, the way that you've been on this journey, the walls that you could have hit, but you've decided to go round, and the pivots you've made, phenomenal. And the one thing that really resonates with me is the fact of like the love that I have for doing this, and like the love that I have for my podcast, and the way that I want to see it be way more than me, is the way that you saw Reebok as well. And that, I think that's the most beautiful thing, and a credit to you for everything you've been on throughout this journey.
Well, it's been a pleasure to talk to you about it. And I think this is what Shoemaker has done. Shoemaker, a lot of people have read it and say, we must know more. So they want to come in and talk, and hopefully, it's not about making money. We've done a couple of universities, London Business School, and they're teaching MBAs, and they start off with, what's your exit plan?
Yeah.
And when they asked me, what was your exit plan, Joe?
You didn't have one, did you?
Didn't have one. No. Exit plan? No. Our mission was to build Reebok, was to build a brand. It's not money.
Yeah, people say to me all the time, their first question to me is, how are you going to monetize this podcast, Frankie? Right, that's the first question to me. How are you going to monetize this podcast? And even though I know that that'll all come down the track, but the most important thing is that, one, I'm enjoying what I'm doing.
Good.
Right?
Yes.
And I love it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be doing this on a Sunday. I wouldn't be inviting you to my house or dragging you down from Manchester on a Sunday if I didn't love what I was doing. And right. Love what you're doing, and also like just put every bit of purpose and passion into something way beyond you. Like exactly what you're saying.
Yes.
It's so important that people understand that and do that in everything that they're doing.
Well, that's how you get a successful mission, because unless you're fully into it, unless you love it, and it's your passion, you're going to find that you'll hit something which is too hard. It's got to be your passion. You can't just get around there being impassionate. It's got to be something that you love. That's why I probably would never have made a good lawyer or a good accountant. because they're so much into the four walls, the barriers that they create these things. I think you have to step outside that box and just be really passionate about whatever you're doing. And yes, not every day will be fun, but if you get up with the idea that it's not going to be fun, then your life will not be fun. You've got to get up with the idea that no, we're going to enjoy today.
And that's how you're living your life now. Because obviously we were talking, me and Julie, before the podcast about the fact of like how you're digital nomads. You're here, there, you're everywhere.
Yes.
But because you're here, there, and everywhere now, you're enjoying life because you don't necessarily know what's around the next turn. You don't have everything. Well,
there are no plans. No, we're just following the journey. The road is leading us, and we're happy to go along and enjoy it.
I love it, Joe. I love it. And if you want to get Joe's book, it's obviously going to be a link on the page or on this podcast to go and buy the book. And Joe, thank you again for your time and everything. Like I loved it.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure anytime. You'll be a friend now, of course. And
yeah, we are. Of course, we're friends.
We'll keep in contact.
Yeah, you're 100%. And guys, get the book. Joe, I think you sell signed editions on your website as well, don't you?
We do on the website. You have to send direct to the website that we have, and you can get a signed book.
You get a signed one, and also on the back of this podcast, I have got for you guys as listeners. Depend on when you see this or listening to this. If you're listening to it 6 months down the track, good luck. But I'm giving away 4 or 5 pairs of shoes that are going to be signed by Joe today to everyone that listens and shares this podcast and really helps us get it out there to more people. And we like, subscribe. We all appreciate it. And if you could do me a solid favour as well, when you listen to this podcast and you see the infinite wisdom that Joe's shared throughout his journey, if you could do me a solid favour and send me a message, send Joe a message, leave us a review on Apple, leave us a comment on YouTube, share it. That all helps and we'd appreciate it. So again, that's Joe Foster. That's the founder of Reebok. And much love.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe.
Lovely, Frankie.
Don't forget to subscribe to the Frankie Lee Podcast.